and he is a chairman and a managing director of Suman Food Consultant, one of the leading food consulting company in agri infrastructure and food processing industry. Mr. Sagar Kurare was past president of All India Food Processors Association and was also on the executive committee member of the leading industry associations like SIFTI and AFSTI. I would now like to ask Mr. Kurade to introduce our panel and also share his thoughtful insights on Atmanirbhar Bharat. Over to you, Sagarji.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you so much. I welcome all. We are going to have a very interesting and important discussion today on Atmanirbhar Bharat, the implications as well as the opportunities that are there for the food processing industry. We have a very esteemed and an exciting panel with us today, representing both multinational companies, MSME companies, national brands as such, as well as banking sector. So without ado, let me just introduce. We have Mr. Akshay Bector, who is the chairman and managing director of Cremica Food Industries Private Limited. We have Anam Sharma, who is the senior manager corporate affairs, Coca-Cola India Private Limited. We have Samana Tejani, director production, Gibbs Food Products Private Limited. And we will be joining in a couple of minutes by Mr. Nitin Puri, who is the senior president, Food and Agri Strategic Advisors and Research, Yes Bank. So without much ado, I think it would be wonderful to take a perspective from the panel to start with as to what Atmanirbhar Bharat as a perspective from each one of you. This is from a point of view that everybody has a different impression with regard to Atmanirbhar Bharat. So it was just to lay down in terms of the table how people are perceiving in the food processing industry their view of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Starting with the ladies, Samana, if you can take the privilege of sharing your thoughts with regard to how you perceive Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme and this to evolve.
So thanks, Agar. So I know there's a lot of debate around what Atmanirbhar means and good or bad, but that's besides the point to me. I think what we kind of need to focus on is to skill up the country in its own, right? We have to concentrate on every part to make us globally competitive. So it cannot be limited to saying just go ahead and buy only from Indian companies. It has to be about going all the way down to the farmer and to educational institutes, to infrastructure. There's a lot we still need to get done, right? So our focus needs to be to make us globally competitive in the market. And after that, we can talk about being globally competitive, and that will make us Atmanirbhar, right? Like then we're really on the playing field. But to kind of just put it in between when we've not really talked about the entire scale, I don't think it's going to get us as far as we need to go.
Right.
But that's my perspective on it.
All right. Akshay, from your side, and Anam, you can follow after that in terms of what's your perspective on Atmanirbhar Bharat.
So I think Atmanirbhar Bharat would be a Bharat which is excelling, highly competitive, and is an international player. And what I see the Atmanirbhar Bharat, whether it is in food processing or any other field, is a country that excels, and excellence should drive our domination or furtherance in the market. And India is a very capable country, and it has been held back on leashes because of various policies, and the government is now trying to open it up. I'm sure that we don't have to ape what has been done by other countries, but in our Atmanirbharta, we need to rely on our strengths, and our strengths are basically knowledge. India is a knowledge economy, and we have always been ahead as far as studies is concerned, and our brain power is reckoned is reckoned all over the world. And I think we need to utilize that and put it on the ground so that in whatever effort, a field we decide, the country should come forward and the industry should be supported in the efforts to become world class. It has happened in some cases, and I think food processing now needs to come of age. It needs to become world class, and it will have to adopt the latest technologies. So there's no question of being defensive about Atmanirbharta. Atmanirbharta will mean actually an opening up, but a graded opening up. And what I do want to see in Atmanirbharta is that the atmosphere is created by the government for a conducive development of Indian businesses, that they are not held back because of certain factors that are kind of unnatural. I think the natural competitive factors have to play, but the unnatural ones have to be held at bay. Whether it is large companies coming in and trying to dominate the scene with money power. I think the Competition Commission of India needs to have more teeth, and it needs to rest. There has to be a part of it that rests with the MSME ministry in a way, because there have been instances where Indian companies that were positioned to move ahead were held back because they lacked the muscle power, or there were artificial injections of money that foreign players have come and done it. So to that extent, the country needs to have a measured response. We need to open up ourselves fully. We need to allow foreign competition in our quest for Atmanirbharta. Don't want to stop it. And at the same time, we should not be held back. So if there is a creation of a monopoly that is happening because of some artificial means, that needs to be stopped. And the availability of the best technologies has to be made. So there's no question of the country shutting its door in this quest. It has to open up, and it has to be very welcoming of each and everyone.
That's an interesting thought, Akshay. Let's take a Coca-Cola perspective. Anam, I believe you are heading the Atmanirbhar Bharat in terms of, from Coca-Cola's point of view, putting things in place or getting that perspective. If you can share how Coca-Cola India is seeing Atmanirbhar Bharat as a scheme and of Government of India.
Thanks, Sagar. So, my take on this particular Atmanirbhar Bharat debate, or ongoing effort of India becoming self-reliant, would be that in the past also, if you see, we have clear policy of Make in India, zero defect, zero effect policy, and rightly so, because we have a huge consumer base, and then that make it very obvious for any government, or for that it makes a very strong business case for businesses as well to cater to that local demand by producing locally. That's for business also, there's a case. So what has happened, that this crisis or this challenge has brought that particular aspect to the fore. And the timing wise, if you see, this particular call of Prime Minister is so apt given the global supply chain disruptions and this challenging environment all around us. This can obviously, in businesses should take a maximum out of this particular aspect and this particular ongoing current and the refreshed momentum being put into system behind this Atmanirbharta all around. And this can go a long way, because if you have to be in business and for a longer time, you have to be sustainable. You have to work with the communities, you have to work with the local partners, you have to meet the local consumer needs, you have to understand that. So it's not that you can just airdrop something, some idea or a product, and if that's not meeting the local ethos, or it's not working for the local communities, the values not created locally and shared locally, I don't think there would be a you can't go beyond a point. So I think this is very relevant, apt. Businesses should take it with both hands and grab the opportunity, care for the community, care for the consumer, bring global technologies, as Mr. Bector mentioned. It's not about compromising on that quality at all. Is feed the Indian population, meet their requirement, and definitely tap into the global supply chain. So that's our understanding, and that's how we see this particular Atmanirbhar Bharat in this day and age.
Thanks. I guess one of the questions that is emerging.
Allow me to add something to what Mr. Sharma has said. You see, there's a lot of thought coming around in the market about not being welcoming to foreign companies. And I must tell you that we, being an Indian company, we've have had in a way relationships. I started off as a JV with a US multinational, and subsequently we became 100% family owned. But I must say that the coming in of foreign companies brings in a lot of management know-how, technical know-how, and other skills, and they have a very valuable part in our Atmanirbharta story. The current thought that is being defensive in the market definitely needs to be questioned, and we cannot make a environment here which makes people wanting to come to India defensive. We have to be welcoming them and with open arms. Yes, at the same time, we have to make sure that there's fair play. And fair play is something that is exercised very aggressively in foreign countries. And in the more developed countries, there's no question of anybody going into the market and creating a monopoly with some muscle power or etc. And the governments come over there very strictly. In India, that has not happened till late. I'm sure the government will become conscious of this. But we have to be very, very welcoming of people who have come to India and invested. I think they have added a lot of value to the Indian economy.
So the thought process here is,
let me question that Coca-Cola itself. Now in 30 years, when Coke came to India, we did not have good sugar in India. It was companies like Coca-Cola that actually worked with the sugar mills and had the sugar industry come to standards that today India produces world-class, sugar. The same was the case of the oil industry. Our oils were not up to the mark. Quality has improved. So in many cases, there are Indian companies that have excelled, and there are many places where multinationals have come in and added a huge amount of value to our system.
So I guess one of the questions that industry is thinking about is a pre-liberalization era, this pre-90s, early 90s, where we were self-contained. We had, Make in India in the form of being self-reliant, and our quality suffered, our productivity suffered. We had issues with regard to being competitive, and we were never part of the global supply chain to the potential that we hold. And then the liberalization happened, and then it kind of led to a globalized environment, and therefore we are in a situation where country has a certain standing, we have a competitive environment happening in the country. Now again, the world is getting into a deglobalized environment. The world is having this anti-China sentiment. We have global supply chain disruptions, and people therefore want to have alternatives. So, Samana, if I can ask you this, what is your perspective in terms of having alternatives as in options with regard to global supply chains, say that may be dedicated in China or somewhere else looking to get into India?
So, it's an interesting question, because I've been hearing this quite a bit, that what industries will move from China to India, and we
or have not necessarily move maybe, but all have an alternate base. It can be either, but yeah.
But see, this is the thing, right? So even as companies, we will always keep two alternatives, right? That's the basis of a good supply chain system, is never be dependent on one supplier, right? My dad used to come into the office and always tell us that you must be aware that if tomorrow, say if you're buying only from one supplier, for example, oil, and his factory catches fire, are you going to close? You're not. So you're always going to have an alternative, right? And that's the same for the global supply chain, that there's always going to be an alternative that needs to stand up. But for us to even become competitive in that global supply chain, a lot of things need to change. And like Mr. Bector said, we have to allow for new knowledge to come through. We have to be conducive about it. The government has to stand with you when you're trying to do that. We can't go up in tariffs and stuff like that. And the anti-China sentiment, it's to me, I'm a little surprised is the word that I would use about it, because I mean, yes, you may want to look at an alternative supplier, but no one's really backed out from there, right? They've had disruptions, but let's keep in mind the whole world is disrupted. Yeah. So I think that there's a fine line. I think that there is an opportunity here that we should all be aware of, but we should not make it sound like this opportunity was not there before the pandemic hit, right? Everybody was trying to develop alternate suppliers. If this happens, what will we do? If that happens, what will we do? So it's not a new thing. It's just that it's gotten highlighted right now and it's taken a different turn. So yes, there's always going to be an alternative, but alternative is something that was always in the process.
Interesting. Nitin, welcome to the panel. I'd like to introduce Nitin Puri, Senior President, Food and Agri Strategic Advisory and Research of Yes Bank. Nitin, you would be in the best position to kind of give a little bit perspective from a point of view of Atmanirbhar Bharat, what it is all about, and from a banking sector perspective, if you can share some thoughts there.
Sure, Sagar bhai. So I think that, as very opportunely indicated and said by the other esteemed co-panelists, step one is to be competitive. How do you build competitiveness? And of course, risks, as in any business, continue to be there, concentration risk, country risk. But the moot point is, how do you build competitiveness? And I think this Atmanirbhar Bharat has actually hit the nail on the head. The government has very cleverly, very intelligently identified the growth movers for us for the next 10 to 15 years. Sectors which are today big and can be bigger, sectors which are small and can be exponentially bigger. In the first category, if you see dairy, fishery, these are two big sectors which constitute almost a third of the Indian agricultural economy by value. Somehow they've been underrated. So while if you look at their size, they may be some $150 billion put together. But if you look at the potential to scale this up, it is at least 2x. So how do you go from $150 to $300 billion over the next 5 to 7 years? You need infrastructure, you need backend, you need the right inputs, you need the right traceability systems, you need access to global markets through the right product. So very cleverly and very clearly, if you look at the Atmanirbhar package, two of the biggest allocations, if you see, have happened in these two sectors, where focus is not just about processing. We normally have a very wrong misconception that processing means the be all and the end all. Processing is not necessarily the only way in which you add value or the way in which you increase your farmers' incomes. You need to have the right varieties, you need to have the right backend, you need to have skilling, you need to have quality, you need to have lower pesticide residues. And now with this entire thing about immunity and health and nutrition post this entire corona crisis globally as well as the new normal, all these things will only assume more importance. So for example, in dairy, it is very important to have clean milk. Unless you have lower somatic cell count, unless you have lesser residues, unless you have the right kind of milk which can actually go into a value-added product, the milk will not even survive once it gets into a value-added product. You will at best be happy selling liquid milk or a few low value-added products, which is precisely the reason why we are absolutely nowhere in the global scene today when it comes to dairy products. We may do some opportunistic trade where we sell some milk powder or SMP just because the global prices are where they are. And because of the way we operate, we get a window of opportunity for a few weeks, but that's it. We do zero value-added product primarily because the quality of milk that we have is such that you can't do value addition, and it will succumb to a point when it comes to the product shelf stability, etc. So the government very intelligently through this, the Matsya Sampada Yojana in the fishery segment and the dairy scheme that's coming out has put in a lot of focus on the back end, developing the back end, collection, farming, and ensuring we are world class, and which is tied up to the debate we were just now having on being competitive. You have to compete to be competitive. So first of all, how do you compete? You compete by building everything world class end to end. So that's category one of initiatives under Atmanirbhar Bharat. The second one, which is about medicinal plants, 4,000 crores has gone into that. Micro enterprises, there are some 2 lakh enterprises. This is about very, very small opportunities today, but they can grow 20x, 30x, 40x, 50x, 100x in the next couple of years. So think of cottage industries today who produce a wealth of goods and services today in rural areas. Food is one amongst them. We've had initiatives like Khadi Village Industries Corporation and various other private initiatives as well. But somehow the micro food enterprises have never become big. Look at a market like Europe. You go to a place called Modena. Modena is known for two things. One is for the world-class luxury cars, the Ferraris of the world. The other thing Modena is famous for is the balsamic vinegar. Now, the balsamic vinegar is something which bases geographical indication, bases a lot of research, a lot of hard work of the people over there. They've come up with a product which is unique and unparalleled anywhere in the world. And small groups of people, what we call FPOs, farmer producer organizations in our parlance, it is an equivalent of that which has sprung up in the rural areas, hinterlands of Modena. And now it's a multi-billion-dollar business. They both sell their products. There is a lot of ecotourism, agri-tourism around that. And that's a big economy, no less than the Ferraris of the world, which come from the same place, Modena. So can you catalyze thousands and tens and thousands and lakhs of such enterprises in rural areas now that you have reverse migration and this entire corona thing that's been going on? And can the government come in to push that and catalyze that? Similarly, with your aromatic plants and nutraceuticals, there is an allocation there as well. This is something where we export only close to about $1.2 billion worth of products. You can actually do $5 to $10 billion. The global market for nutrition, health, immunity is big. And why even global exports? The domestic market itself, we are 1.3 billion people. We have our own nutrition and immunity needs as well. So this is a very small industry. So the second set of packages very intelligently has been packaged for micro food enterprises incubation, which is infrastructure, skilling, hand-holding, developing brands, marketing support, back-end linkages, corporate government linkages, etc. And this entire piece around developing the entire Himalayan belt as a big brand proposition globally as well, and for India in the medicinal plant space. So I think the government has very intelligently, if you see, rightly bracketed two big initiatives. One, large sectors which can grow 2x, 3x, 4x, so from 5 billion to 10 billion, 15 billion, 20 billion. And the other very small, but which can grow 50x, 100x. So to that extent, I think it's a very intelligently packaged proposition that we have. Of course, we can always debate, they could do this, they could do that. Why not some more of initiatives on fruit juice concentrate, etc., etc. But I think they've rightly done an ABC classification, identified where we need to get competitive, how we need to get competitive, and what are the incentives we need to provide in order to do that.
So, Nitin, talking about competitive, I'm going to put this question to Anam from Coca-Cola. Anam, when we are talking about vocal for local, as the logo stands when it comes to Atmanirbhar Bharat, we have a situation in our industry where good capacity machines, highly efficient machines, and even sometimes gulab jamun making machines, they are all, I mean, we are importing it from other countries. The capacities with regard to Indian machinery suppliers, the high capacity machines, or the industry is adopting and importing it from abroad. Same are the issues with regard to the food ingredients that are going into many of our food products. So when we talk about vocal for local, when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, how can this be connected with the global supply chain and make ourselves more competitive? How can this work out?
So, Sagar, very pertinent question. Actually, this vocal for local, at times can be seen very closed market. I think that's not at all an idea, and government has been clarifying it. Various forum, Mr. Bector also mentioned. So, if you see the journey, actually, this Atmanirbharta is not a switch on off situation. It has to be a journey which you have to traverse over time. And then there are a lot of promises of brands and commitment and consistent quality you have to provide to the consumer. If you are seeing it overall and being competitive and going to the next level and getting into the global supply chain. I can definitely tell you that today we produce everything locally to the tune of 90 to 98%. I'm saying this is all inclusive in terms of all the ingredients. But I'm sure that this was not the case, as Mr. Bector mentioned, that while pre-90s and post-90s, this percentage would have been gradually we have reached these levels, obviously. So this is where we are. And today, while I said ingredients and people and the operators and manufacturers and other partners, still there's a lot of capital goods which are machinery still being imported, because you have to maintain that quality, and that technology for reasons has yet not come to that level and not available locally. People are mindful of the fact that they have to come to India, and they are trying to make some shifts in that direction as well. They are moving some capital good manufacturing, assembling, or some part of it locally here. So that's what I would say. And specifically, I would like to mention that so you're right. We are not competitive when it comes to as an industry. Some fruit concentrate. Just take an example of orange juice. So industry would would be importing large part of orange juice. For simple reason that is very cost effective. So to the tune of 20 to 30% at times, despite paying all the duties and all logistics behind it. Companies like us is binding on us that we have to make some steps in that direction also, and I think take the whole ecosystem together. So today sugar is taken care, and now maybe next journey could be can we do something for the farmers? Can we bring those varieties to India which are actually more processable and more ROI is higher when it comes to processing of those varieties? So we have some initiatives under our flagship program Unnati. So where apple which we grow in India and what we can get is 5x. So differential is 5x, and this is already in action as we are talking, in the third year of implementation in Uttarakhand. And this does two things. One, it is not only giving you a higher yield, it also cuts short the harvester cycle also. So instead of 10 years, the first crop and full crop would be in the third or the fifth year. So that's how I see it. In terms of being competitive, you have to move local if you want to be in the game for a longer time, and you have to develop products also. So it's not that just what we used to sell 20 years back in India, we are selling only those products today. So there's a lot of change. So a lot of product development has happened. More brands have come. Some brands we have taken from here, from India to outside also. So I think for us, it's very interesting journey. We are a global company, but wherever we operate, whether it be any part of the world, we have to work and operate very locally there through the local partners. So I think this story of Atmanirbhar Bharat is very relevant and very close to our heart, and the purpose of the company to work along with the communities.
I guess one of the reasons of Atmanirbhar Bharat is to increase our exports and reduce the dependence on imports. So something like a frozen juice concentrate may be looked at being produced in India versus getting imported at some point of time in the future, with varieties getting introduced in India with more alternative and options that may happen. Am I right, Anand?
If I can add, actually, this import-export equation is dependent on what is available locally there and is not available locally there. And Nitin also alluded to the point that there are few products which are GI, geographical indicator, or their IP around it. So those you can't manufacture locally. Or there is some innovation which is not happening. You have to just bring it and adopt it to the local ethos, and strategic obligations are also there at times. Some treaties are around it. So we have to see this whole equation in that complete scenario wise. But I agree to your point that, for example, we happen to be again for the system, Coca-Cola system. India happens to be very important part in that sense. A lot of mango, a lot of coffee, a lot of refrigeration ecosystem has grown over the years. In 20 years, we being in company, other players are also there. So the allied industry has now scaled up to a level where they have come to that, your point, being competitive in global arena. And they are now, it's not only about fruit, and you're right. So it is exactly end to end. Maybe we are exporting a lot of refrigeration equipment from India to the world. A lot of other, this methyl MEG, which goes into plant bottle, is being exported from India. So this is where we can play a role, obviously, and there is definitely a scope of stepping it up, bringing more value, stepping up to the next level of value addition. So those all things are there, but you can't see it very linearly, because you can't produce everything locally. You have to interdepend on various other countries, geographies for various things, be it technology, be it excellence, at times innovation or brands or product solutions. So that's how I would like to respond to that, Sagar.
Can I just add, Sagar, here?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know that I mean, your original question started out with capital goods and machinery, and I can tell you for a fact that technology-wise we are way behind. Right? Like it's not even, we're nowhere close to where we need to be as far as that is concerned. And a lot of the technology people are complaining that, you know, even if we develop high-class equipment, people aren't willing to pay from here. So I think it's a hand-in-glove thing, but I think that we must acknowledge that we really do need to bring in some partnerships as far as this is concerned, so that we can start the development, right? So
Yeah.
like you're saying, like in a country like India, where we can grow pretty much anything across the country, we don't have enough pre-processing infrastructure to be able to really carry the chain forward. You know, Nitin gave a very good example yesterday of the apples and the concentrate. And I
Yeah.
think that's, you know, it's really, I mean, if we have the time, you must tell that story, because that's truly the direction we need to be heading in, right? We can't,
Yeah.
it's not an isolated thing. Like for us right now, we're building a plant. I've had to import 95% of what's going into the plant.
Yeah.
Just take half a minute, Sagar bhai, just half a minute between what Anam and Samana just said. Agriculture, unfortunately, is not a 5-year plan. It needs to be a much longer haul game. The example that Anam and Samana were referring to, if you look at our apple, orange, citrus, lime example, couple of countries like China were nowhere 20, 25 years back. Today, they are amongst the world's largest. How did they do that? Whereas we were much better positioned because they built an entire value chain. They brought in the right varieties. We didn't have the right breaks, the right juice percentage in our product. We didn't have infrastructure facility to manufacture pectin oil from the skin of the fruit. And that is incidentally 50% of the EBITDA margin of this business. Juice is actually a byproduct.
Yeah.
We think of it otherwise. And then you build in the entire infrastructure to support this through equities, etc. Now, if you want to bring in a variety, it takes a couple of years, if not decades, sometimes for many crops. If you have a 10-year program, 15-year program, have a vision, have the right kind of support as the government has rightly done through the Atmanirbhar program, I think that is the kind of mindset we need to develop markets, expand markets, and to be Atmanirbhar eventually, self-dependent. And as rightly said, it's not about inward looking. Inward looking is different from being self-dependent. So let's be strong. Let's think long term. Let's loop in the money incentive scheme appropriately, and not the other way around, that because we have a scheme, we'll put infrastructure and we'll put X capacity and Y capacity there.
Yeah, that's been typically the approach sometimes of some enterprises, many times in India. Akshay, I'd like to pose you this question. When it comes to a strategy in terms of the current coronavirus pandemic and in terms of the current situation, where government is wanting an Atmanirbhar situation, what do you think is the strategy forward that Indian companies should adapt or adopt with regard to being successful on global platforms, not just in India?
So, I think a very relevant question, Sagar. And I think we need to delve in as a country on this, that what is it that is going to drive us to build ecosystems that are world class. And I think we need to learn from success stories. Well, there are umpteen of them. Amul is one of them. And going back to Punjab, where I'm a little aware of the history of Punjab and how the development happened. Large part of the development of Punjab and all the industrial houses that you see over there today, be it a Baxi or a Vardhaman, or the spinning mills, or Swaraj Mazda, or you had, companies that got destroyed, semiconductor devices, etc. Pretty much units of national importance were all created by some government intelligence and thought, actually. They were more like missions, that it was a mission to industrialize. And if you look at it and, you look at Amul, you look at the vaccine industry of India, large indulgences in these industries have been spearheaded by the government, that have been monitored by the government. I think we need to adopt the same kind of a mission approach And what like Nitin was saying, you just don't look at apple juice or just like growing apple. You have to look at the whole ecosystem. So it has to be a mission, and it has to have the ability to, drive the policy framework required to develop this. There will have to be, there's a need for recapitalization of the economy in the same way in which other countries have done. I don't know to get into naming countries, but almost every country has capitalized industry and local entrepreneurs. And there will be a need for the Indian government to step in over there. But at the same time, back, companies and efforts that are producing results, okay, that have the ability to, or have demonstrated some success and then take it up from there. So largely it is going to be a mission approach that will be successful. Individually, if companies try to get into this mode on their own, they can be successful, but it might take much longer. And Nitin said very rightly, it is a 30-year program. It's not a 1 or 2 year program. All the stories that you see today that have become world class, all of these foundations were laid 20, 30 years ago. And we have to lay those foundations today in the same manner. I don't think that we can ape what has been done in other countries. I'm really, if we start redoing things that have been done 20 years back in India today, we'll be walking the wrong path. Yeah. We need to identify and do new things that take us on that, path of excellence, and just bringing labor, efficiency out of China into India will help a little bit. But I think we need to bring in the knowledge aspect in as much. And it has to apply in each and every field. We have to excel. And we should excel both, from an efficiency standpoint and also from a technical standpoint. India can do it.
Interesting. And Nitin, can you lay down the schemes or incentives that have been proposed by Government of India with regard to Atmanirbhar Bharat? If you can lay out to our audience and share what government is thinking, Government of India is thinking with the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, and what are the incentives being considered?
Sure. So I think, as I highlighted in the opening remarks, 2 areas: existing big sectors becoming bigger, small sectors who can become exponentially bigger. So if you look at the first bucket, there is something called Animal Husbandry Infrastructure Development Scheme, where 15,000 crores has been set aside potentially to do more of work at the back end, which is about better quality milk, clean milk collection infrastructure, BMC, BLC setup, and some amount of infrastructure on the processing side. Because processing, in fact, we have extra capacities today. We don't even utilize more than 60-70% of our existing processing capacity, except maybe for some value-added products. So a very strong focus of this 15,000 crore will be on the back end, on the farm level, cleaner milk production initiatives and the collection infrastructure, which is very critical to maintain the right quality so that you produce the right value-added product, which eventually also can go into exports as well, big time. The second big one is on the Matsya Sampada Yojana, which is the fishery development scheme, which has the same philosophy. It is, of course, about also value-added, because right now we do only shrimps as a product. It is more than 90-95% of what we export. Yeah. But the point is, why not beyond shrimp? Why not get into inland fishery, freshwater fishery, and the fish and aqua shrimp market in itself, domestically itself, can grow very big. But there are challenges on food safety, traceability, quality. So again, a lot of this money that is going to go under the Matsya Sampada scheme is also going to eventually get into the building of the back-end infrastructure, the right brood stock, the right traceability systems, the right infrastructure and support, and the enabling ecosystem, of course. So this, and the third one under this first bracket is the top to total scheme. So earlier you had a scheme called tomato, onion, potato. Now it says from tomato, onion, potato to all. So TOTAL, to all. So wherein they want to not just do tomato, onion, potato, but all horticultural produce all over India, wherever there is opportunity to be globally competitive, value add, export, and do a good job of domestic market as well.
Nitin, the top scheme of Government of India, which is tomato, onion, potato, that is being expanded. Am I right?
That's being expanded, and there is a two-dimensional expansion that is going to happen. One is addition of commodities. The other is now it will no longer be only a capex grant scheme. Earlier it was only a capex grant that you would get. There is a second dimension which they've added very nicely, as in they will also incentivize transportation, storage, and any other value addition requiring any other fiscal incentives or operational incentives rather than only a capex incentive. Because oftentimes what happens is people set up capex infrastructure, and it sometimes later on it becomes a white elephant. So somewhere they're trying to nudge people to say, we'll give you money not just for putting in something upfront, but we will also watch you, monitor you along the way as well, and give you operational subsidies and grants for your efficiency as you use that infrastructure as well. So these are the ones on the first bracket. On the second bracket, there is 10,000 crore on micro-food enterprises, which I detailed out: cottage industries, micro-food enterprises who should enter the larger mainstream market across staples to horticulture to spices to fruits to vegetables. That's one.
I think, Nitin, there is up to 10 lakh in incentives.
That is up to 10 lakh.
Micro sector.
So there are three parts to that. One, they will give a cash incentive. Second, there is some dispensation on interest subvention. And third, which is most important to my mind more than the money, these micro enterprises need to be handheld and trained on what is the best in class in terms of food safety, protocol, system, quality. Because unless they do that, whatever marketing support, you provide, whatever e-commerce support you give to them, handholding you give to them, unless the consumer accepts the quality and unless the trust, today there is a trust deficit. If I go to a supermarket and if I see 5 brands, of which one is a multinational and 4 are some unheard of brands, I'll obviously not go for them because I don't trust. So how do you build trust into these guys, and how does a consumer believe that what is packaged, what it purports to be, and what is inside the ingredient and everything that has gone in is actually worth what it is? So a lot of skilling, hand-holding support in kind is also going to be provided to these 2 lakh such enterprises all over India. And this can be a revolution of sorts, especially as I said earlier as well with reverse migration now. Where do you employ 50, 60, 70 lakh people? So this is one. And the second, under the second bracket, the second sub-component is 4,000 crore on herbal cultivation. So there is an entire initiative to develop the entire Himalayan belt right across the country as the hub of the herbal nutraceutical industry for global markets and for India. So here again, a lot of back-end initiatives on the right varietals and helping the tribals, helping domestically grow that as well on farms as well, and value addition. So today we do almost 90%, 95% of business that we do in this segment happens to be in the non-value added space, while we have curcumin and a couple of other nutraceutical companies which have now come up in the last couple of years, but still they are a very small fraction of the overall opportunity. We just do 1 billion, 1.5 billion, as I said earlier as well. So why not 5 billion? Why not 10 billion? We pride ourselves as having the right, geographical agroclimatic diversity, and we can literally grow anything and everything in the Himalayas and on the foothills. So why not bring science to ancient wisdom, and why not blend tradition with science? And this becomes a great opportunity. We've tried it, but it's been very small. It's been a couple of handful of people. And again, there is a lot of quote unquote fraud which happens here. So, you also need to build trust. If somebody is going to buy from you as India, they should not see us as some fly-by-night guys coming up with some formulation which is not FDA compliant, food safety compliant, certificate of origin, organic certification. All of us are aware of all of this. Somewhere the trust element has to be built, and if that's done, this will be a harbinger of a great opportunity for rural India in my mind. And our $400-500 billion agri GDP can cross $1 trillion in the next 4 to 5 years.
This is an important point, Nitin, you raised, because one of the fears is that how do you ensure that when you're talking vocal for local and when you're talking Atmanirbhar, how do you ensure that the quality doesn't suffer? How do you ensure that when we are looking at local products, the efficiency is not impacted with regard to production, especially in a country where, in India, where in general the consumers are price sensitive, and yet the quality expectations are high. So, Anap, if you can share a little bit with your perspective in terms of how do you ensure that your vendors or Coca-Cola as a company is more local oriented, also at the same time your vendors' qualities and processes are not impacted and well adhered to Coca-Cola standards.
So again, Sagar, this quality is something which cannot change, and everything around it to support that quality would be a journey. So whatever quality of a product, for example, Coke, a Coca-Cola product is in India, the same would be across the globe of the same standards, and that's not which one can compromise, and that's the brand promise. Now comes it's irrespective whether a person is consuming that product in a five-star setting or on the roadside. So again, it's like same product at the same price point. I'm just answering to your question actually. So it's possible, I guess, it's possible that there would be price sensitive market in India. So you have to make your offerings definitely. It could be serve size, it could be packaging formats, or something around that. But the quality you can still maintain, and you have to maintain, because that's the promise you have. So I don't think that price and quality cannot go along. So that has not been the case. It's all about how you can meet or bring that sweet spot between that quality and the consumer expectation around that quality at that particular price point. So it could be through various innovations, product innovations, packaging formats, as I said, and maybe bringing more efficiencies and scale in your processes. So I think that would be the key to say this. And I don't think people do know that they are having options, and at what points they have options, and this is an open market. So that's the beauty, and that's the, even if you have to spend extra 10 paisa for a product, they don't mind also, because that's what has you have asked one question in your previous reference, which we missed answering. That what has changed between pre-90s and now. So even you see, a consumer has become more brand aware. They know, they are no more quality conscious now, and this is Indian consumer I'm talking here. So I think these are there. I'm not saying that price sensitivities are not there, but I think there's greater appreciation, much higher appreciation towards quality and brands as well. Few more things which have changed and supported the businesses to take that journey is few major reforms in terms of tax reform. So that would give businesses that buoyancy to bring those efficiencies and commit at that price point the same quality, which is definitely not, you can't compromise on as a brand. There are e-commerce channels, there you definitely have some efficiencies in networks and otherwise also. So we have to leverage on these, and some agriculture reforms are happening. So there would be some back-end interventions, there would be some supply chain intervention. So you have to see that, and you have to make that delivery of that promise as a brand, and keep the value story live. Yeah, that's.
Samana, you are aware, I think the government of India has now changed the definition of MSME and put it up to 250 crores. I'm not aware, I'm presuming you are in the MSME category as such, but it's for you to. So assuming now that you're in the MSME category, which is great, but what are the challenges you face? Because I have to ask this COVID related question. Like, as an MSME, what are the challenges you face with regard to the COVID situation, and what could have been done in terms of managing the situation better? And Samana, after this, Akshay, if you can share your thoughts also. Samana, please go ahead.
So, I think all MSMEs had the same challenge, right? How do you bring your workforce back? And for us specifically, we are quite labor intensive. So we actually faced multiple challenges, a little bit harder because we're located in Pune 1, and within Pune we were in a zone, we were in a red zone. So for a long time we didn't get permission to start up, and for the safety of everybody, that's fine. But for a long time we didn't start up, and then when we did, we had to, we started at a minuscule level and slowly kind of built up from there. But the thing is that we could survive a couple of weeks because we had enough stock across the country to go ahead and do that. But the long-term effect of it was also when we start bringing people back to the workforce, it's one, is difficult. Right now we have all these additional things that we need to take care of, and two, they're not really available anymore. So even though we're very local to the community, we hire from within our community, a lot of people have gone back. So we're still hiring kind of, new hires, and we have to retrain and redo that. we have to be a lot more careful with, with, I mean, food industry anyway is very high on sanitation. So we were kind of okay over there. But now even that has gone up a notch, right? The other is building in all these COVID SOPs that we had to bring in.
Absolutely.
And say, okay, so your neighbor has it, you have to come and tell us, and then what's the protocol going to be going forward? So I think that all of us had the same sort of challenges. The other one was hugely transport. We had, when the lockdown happened, we had 3 containers sitting here for export, completely packed, ready to ship, and we could not send them out for a month, right? So I think that those things kind of were really challenging for us, because you have to remember, for an MSME, maybe even for a larger company, the primary thing is cash flow. And how do you manage if you're not selling anything anymore? So I think that was a challenge. We're back, we're up and running, but we're all running at about 50%, right? Unless you're a fully automated plant, which in the MSME category you're not really going to be. There's that. But I will say this: it has given us, it's given us a very different lens on the factory. What do we need to do differently? How do we need to, automate smaller lines, smaller automations? The Jugaad concept, as I say, which I highly, don't allow my team to say that word, but to come up with innovative ways to be able to combat the labor problem that we currently have. But I think that it did cause disruption. Now, hopefully, we're on a way back, but we are in Maharashtra, so I always say that very cautiously. That there is that we think we may get back on track soon, but we're still operating at 50% to make it known. So that's where we stand right now.
Akshay, your perspective on the COVID situation and how Cremica is dealing with the situation.
The COVID situation is, I think Samana has portrayed it quite well. It's the same situation, so there's not much of a change. But I'd like to, go back to the MSME definition that you'd asked me to speak about. I think the government has done well to raise some of the, qualifiers. But are they aligned with the rest of the world? So there they have to take a look. I think that they're still slightly misaligned, and they may need to scale up further. I think most countries would qualify a medium, small enterprise less than $100 million. So there may be a need to look into it once again, because you have to have a level playing field across the world. And almost all those companies across the world are having some governmental play now happening in the next few years, and Indian companies will have to, apologies, stand against them. So there's a need for that to be, restated perhaps a little more. Nitin has touched a lot on the incentives, but I think one thing that we are missing, I think the big opportunity is the equity fund that the government wants to create and use. And I think that is where the, strategic value can be created in terms of, let's talk about where I had left earlier in this discussion, that creating those missions and, strategic enterprises that will carry each and every, let's say Amul is, or a few companies like Amul are driving dairy. And there would be some other companies that could drive mango and tomato, etc. And I'm talking of, agricultural produce, but I would like to say this for almost, this should be like a mission for every industry that we talk about: machine building, process equipment, etc. You name it, whatever it is. The fund should be utilized intelligently. We need to have a good system. We need to study how these type of equity indulgences were done in earlier days that made exceeded successful large corporates, how they were handheld over 10, 20 years by the state development corporations. Some of them did a good job. Some of them did a bad job. And, let us learn from the people who've done a good job. Some of them are still around, get them on board to build the systems that will enable. Because a lot of time, government draws policies and they don't see, the final result, because there's some flaw in the system. For example, in the food processing, initiatives, there's always a problem with the last installment. Now, if there's going to be a problem with the last installment, we've kind of, really taken the entrepreneur squeezed the hell out of him and then left him to rot because his unit is not going to run. And that's when the indulgence is required. And if let us say that 97, 98% of the job is done, and for 2% you're going to hold back, sponge his working capital away, then you're having a streak of, set of units which are not so good. So there's a need to build a proper policy framework. All these things need to be ironed out. The equity fund needs to be very intelligently utilized. It's, I think, a great move. And it needs to start getting allocated to the ministries, and they need to find a way in which they are going to, put money where it is required on good units. And not everybody will get it, but some people will get and they'll benefit. So that's, I think, the direction that the country needs to take. A lot has been done, and I think we are ahead, looking forward to some very exciting times, because the environment is also positive. China is going to have its own problems, and because of their problems, they are trying to create issues which we are facing at the border, which is actually, I would say, a minor blimp, and I don't even want to bother about it, because the more such incidents happen, the better it is for the country, and you're going to have a lot more people coming in. So we should look forward to, really creating world-class businesses now.
I totally agree, Akshay, because in this pandemic, one thing I can tell you is there's a lot more interest in food processing sector now versus earlier, because it's considered as part of the essential. It is farm centric. There is a huge horticulture, agriculture base in the country, and it is ideal from a point of view of value addition. Nitin, if you can elaborate this part that Akshay mentioned with regard to any additional thing that Government of India can think of, or what can be more recommendation in terms of making Atmanirbhar even more relevant to our schemes and for food processing industry. Any suggestions that can come forth?
Sure. So I think, as Akshay has rightly set the tone, being Atmanirbhar in supply chain efficiency infrastructure may not be enough. You also need to be Atmanirbhar as far as your source of funds goes on the equity side as well, because we do a lot of capital coming in from all over the world. And why not the government creatively create an ecosystem and a template and a format, just like you have Singapore and so many countries with Temasek and so many other sovereign funds, which actually invest equity money. And it could be a fund of funds, you could pull in private people, it could be a JV between the government. There are various ways that you can do it. But I think this is a very important point which Akshay has mentioned, that catalytic support is needed not just for fiscal incentive or capital grant or supply chain improvement or farm level efficiency, but also for equity money. So that's of course the first point. I think the second point, while we are talking of food processing, but if we expand the definition a little wider, not just to food processing, but also to include primary processing, which is strictly speaking not food processing, the entire fresh produce space, all said and done, whether we like it or not, India will continue to be a largely fresh produce consumption country for two reasons. One is our behavior, by behavioral choice, that's how we are as Indians. Number two, we are blessed agroclimatically. So you have a lot of stuff which comes around the year from some part of the country or the other. So we will, unlike milk, maybe one exception, which is a highly perishable commodity, and you need to go to a packaging and processing, etc., to ensure. And so for perishables, while that may be a story, highly perishable commodities, but for most other, including fruits and vegetables, bulk of the consumption, 98, 97, 98% continues and will continue in the fresh space. Now, there is a lot of potential for the existing organized food players, food processing players, to also look at this sector. Because now with the increasing need of health, food safety, hygiene, the potential, breakout of another virus somewhere, some zoonotic disease coming up somewhere, I think a lot of fake news going around on this, but it also merits a discussion and a debate as to, is this exactly possible? And if it happens, it can be really disastrous for, us as a country. So both in our own enlightened self-interest to protect ourselves from a health standpoint, and the sheer opportunity. Now look at with this entire APMC Act disruption that has happened. Not that this was not happening earlier. There were states which had deregularized fruits and vegetables as well. But the entire thing around bureaucracy and last mile privilege and freedom of power and somebody to please something from somebody has now totally gone away. So it's a free country, just like in 1991 moment for us as it happened on the larger economy. wherein it's a free market. So can the food processing sector also put in the time, money, energy, and efforts to bring a revolution in the fresh produce space? We've already seen last 6 to 8, 9, 10 weeks now, since the entire mandi system had collapsed. A lot of these small guys who were earlier doing 1 truckload, 2 truckloads of fresh produce aggregation on an e-commerce platform have now ramped up to 5 truckloads, 10 truckloads, 20 truckloads per day. So can you, just like the food processing, secondary, tertiary value addition segment, can you also build an ecosystem for fresh produce, build markets, build food safety, build traceability, build supply chain infrastructure? Don't just look at domestic market. The global market is huge. We do hardly not even a few, billions of dollars worth of fresh produce export today. And unfortunately, most of it is opportunistic trade. Just because we are lower on a price point, while we may not be so good on our back end and our food quality and systems process. So why do $2-3 billion? You could do 20, 30, 40 billion dollars. Horticulture is 1/3 of the Indian agriculture economy by volume, out of 1 billion tons, metric
Absolutely.
tons. Yeah. So that is a very big space and a very big opportunity. And you have adjacencies where you do fresh and some secondary processed and some value addition and some, other high-end product as well. So I think, and that is also going back to our orange and lime and apple example. It's not that if you're a processor, and if you want to set up a backend, you will say, I want only grade C apples, which come at 4 rupees 65 paisa per kg. Unfortunately, it will not work that way. If you want to engage with farmers, you have to buy everything from them, and you have to find ways of creatively selling everything out of that as well. So increasingly, a lot of companies in India have already started doing this, and a lot of collaboration also. You would have observed many large FMCG companies are today riding on the distribution network of the aggregators, for example. So a lot of potential for collaboration between the large food processing, not just large, I'm saying serious, large is the wrong word, sorry. Serious food processing players also to look at this adjacency and this opportunity and dovetail their processing business with this and develop a line for fresh produce for the domestic market and the export market as well. This is my only submission. This is a big opportunity for all you know. This may be bigger than the food processing sector itself.
Absolutely. So this comes to one key question before we go to take before we go on to take question answers from people who have posted questions. I wanted to take a perspective on what opportunities that could possibly be emerging in the current scenario. Samana, if you can share some thoughts from your perspective in an Atmanirbhar Bharat environment, in a environment where we are looking at local, at the same time we are looking at being part of the global supply chain, ensuring quality. What are the opportunities that you think may emerge in the current situation?
So, everybody kind of commented on how big the space in India really is. And I think that that's something that is kind of starting to show up. So I have two sides to that. One is, before all this happened, the food industry was labeled as, don't eat processed food, they're bad for you, they're this, that, the other. And then we finally took off during the pandemic, right? When we said, okay, people wanted processed food because it's easier to make, it's that kind of stuff. So I think we have a huge opportunity just within the country to be able to provide good quality, good tasting processed food and take away the misconceptions associated with what we do. So I've actually had somebody kind of come up to me once and said, no, you have to put a preservative in your food, otherwise how does it stay? And so the insinuation was that we don't put the preservatives on the label. So I think our one big opportunity right now is to educate the public, to say that, look, processed food is not all bad. We are all actually trying to strive for the same thing, and to introduce variants that really allow the Indian public to play with it. The other thing that I think we have a huge opportunity for is capitalizing on Indian food being more convenient, right? Which is what Gitz's base was that. But the idea is, we were having an interesting conversation at home the other day where I said, I'm happy to cook a pasta, but I don't know how to cook that. So if that is the case, and people like me are really the next generation that's going to be looking for food, we want easier solutions specifically for Indian food. So I think that if we can make that available to the Indian public, the global world has already started accepting Indian food as the next, as the next market. So we will be able to kind of play that tune alongside. And for competitiveness around the world, I think that it's important that we acknowledge everything that's related to it, right? That we're open to all sorts of collaborations and to all sorts of
Did we lose Samana's video there for a moment? Well, while Samana comes, Akshay and Anam, if you can share quickly with regard to the opportunities that can be emerging possibly. Anam, starting with you and then with Akshay. What opportunities you think can be emerging in the current scenario?
Yes, so very pertinent question actually. So if you see in 25 years, largely, I would say it's not that totally. We as a industry, I'm talking on behalf of largely food processing industry and including Coca-Cola and that, have made interventions because that was the demand. Even Samana was referring to that point. There's a lot of consumer perception. You have to, bring that acceptance, or you have to ready the market in terms of whether it's distribution systems or is it product innovation, making that availability, and you have to bring new products or brands to the market and introduce those to that consumer. So that part, I think fairly we have made some journey and headway there. The next opportunity which we see, partially we have done to raise the bar of the ecosystem players, suppliers, and things around that. Next level, which I see it bringing the loop and bringing it full circle, go towards the backwards. So there is a supply side interventions we have already done by making the product available to the market. Now we have to look for the farmers, maybe go beyond the processing units who are sourcing from farmers. Can we do something for farmers? I'm not saying as a philanthropic only, obviously with a business case. Can we go to them, talk to them, provide them something which is more processable, such varieties? Can there be some good agriculture practices shared with them, and then can we take those things to farmers as industry, or maybe through some mechanism? Definitely individually companies are doing it, and obviously if that happens and there is a quality assurance around it, we definitely can cater to the local markets and definitely go beyond India to supply to other parts of the market or within the system, and definitely that's what I see as an opportunity going forward.
Akshay, from your perspective, I think we as food industry definitely benefited with the globalized environment where a lot of processable varieties got introduced into the country, whether it's potatoes, sometimes tomatoes, and a lot of other processable varieties got introduced into the country, and it helped our food processing industry. So in the current scenario, in current deglobalized environment, what do you think is the opportunities that will be emerging?
So, the world is looking at a slightly prolonged recession, and there may not be very quick opportunities that will come abroad, out of COVID, but yes, long-term opportunities are going to be plenty. And we will see, shifting of the supply chain. I think India has set a fine example of whatever little work it's done. I think it's a country that has delivered. So unlike China, where there's a lot of issues with quality of product that you can get from there, you just don't know where you can go with a slightly unreliable supplier. Barring the top company or two, you are really, treading on a very, very slippery ground over there. Whereas in India, that is not so. And as India becomes a little bit more visible, I think we are going to gain. I think the government needs to do a few things, and I would take it from where Anam has said. Very important that we should seize the time to bring in the varieties on the horticultural side and on any other side that bring about the desired efficiency increase, plants will come. But the bigger problem is that the varieties are not okay. I can see the recent example where government asked us to intervene in the Haryana tomato problem. We found that the farmers are growing varieties which are so unprocessable that they are just unviable even at a throwaway price. You just can't process them. The whole plant capacity comes down. So there's a need for bringing in the right varieties. That needs to be done ahead of time. Industry will follow that. Okay, so it should not be done that first you put up the factories and then because these things are going to take a year, 2 years, 3 years. Factory will be ready, and then what do you do for 2-3 years? And by that time, the unit will go sick. So they need to, start these programs on the agricultural side. On the business side, opportunities can be expanded if the government was to have a duty refund scheme which is a little more pragmatic or easy. Indian raw materials are not priced as per world market. Everything has a very high duty. We have a protection for our farmers. But when we are trying to export, especially when the MSME industry, the small scale person wants to import, he really cannot take advantage of an import license and do everything. The whole way in which, the refunds of duties paid, presumed duties that have been paid, is quite tedious. And there's a need for refinement over there. So that will open up a lot more, players to international market and let the efficiencies flow through. Right now, we are restraining the industry somewhat because visibly to an entrepreneur, it doesn't look viable until and unless he gets very serious and, then it delves into the whole gamut of the supply chain, that how the refunds will come through, etc. And I think till that much time, the game is lost. So opportunities will come through, but I'll, back Mr. Sharma on this, that we need to first start growing the right varieties. At least as far as agri-produce is concerned, that is the key thing.
Interesting. And Nitin, I'm going to let you end this with your thoughts in terms of what the opportunities are going to emerge. And once Nitin is done, I would love to take question answers. And there are several questions that have been put by our audience. But Nitin, if you can share your final thoughts with regard to what the opportunities that may be emerging in a deglobalized environment right now.
Sure. I think Akshay ji and Anand were bang on. So the varietal improvement and getting into a program where over a 10 to 15 year period you become globally efficient, globally competitive. That's very important across the board for a wide variety of commodities, not just in the process space, but also in the fresh produce space. The second, I think, big disruption which is now happening with this entire crisis, and the crisis only getting prolonged on and on as we see it now, is the entire demand side disruption. People's behavioral changes and habits which are changing for good, which should have happened in the past as well, is something which is an opportunity to my mind. So the entire piece around health, the entire piece around immunity, I think these are two big themes which are going to lead to new categories of products, new industries that are going to come up, and new innovations that are going to come up. So, and India is blessed, as I said earlier as well. India is blessed as far as the agroclimatic conditions, the wealth of our backend is concerned. You just need to bring in science, you just need to bring in technology, standardization, food safety, protocols, develop the right ecosystem, and there is a multi-billion-dollar, tens of hundreds of billions of dollars of domestic and global market out there waiting for us. Unfortunately, we've strangled it and kept it in close holds for various reasons, political, social, commercial, and otherwise. I think that is one stranglehold which needs to go away, and we've already seen a lot of very good, pragmatic, positive steps from the government in this direction, including on the medicinal plants piece, which we were talking of about half an hour back. So that, to my mind, health foods, nutrition foods, immunity foods, as a space is going to boom like anything. It's going to grow exponentially upwards of 20, 25, 30% per annum. Small category for us as India today, big category globally. This is something where we need to focus and become Atmanirbhar and at the same time contribute to the prosperity of the Indian farmer as
well. Lovely. Friends, I think we have had a good discussion with regard to discussing the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan from Government of India as proposed, as well as trying to understand its implications and opportunities. With that, I would like to open this panel up for questions, and we have several of them. Anam, I will start with you. One of the questions asked by one Mr. Shubhrant Chandra. The question is with regard to, are we going to look at local Indian drinks from Coca-Cola now that we are looking at vocal for local?
I would say answer is yes, a big yes. So we have just started in India. It's a 25-year journey in a history of a company which is over 134 years old. And this localization journey we have already started. So so we have added a lot of local fruit juices to our master brands, and then we have made the offering to people. Already this journey is already we have started. So in the times to come, it's going to become even bigger than. So answer to that question is yes. So we are committed to local consumers, their tastes, and we have been doing experiments around Chach, around, for example, Kesari mango drinks, very hyper local, so to say, drinks around it, with lychee of Bihar, with santra of Nagpur. So we have been doing some experiments and product innovations around that, and have seen very favorable and encouraging results as a consumer response. So we will continue to do that.
Wonderful. Nitin, I have one question from Pranam Dave with regard to finance being one of the key fuels for food processing industry. So are we looking at any additional incentives that probably can be coming from government with regard to the current COVID situation that may be emerging?
There is already a credit-free, collateral-free credit guarantee system, which is already there as part of the dispensation. If you look at part 1 of the Atmanirbhar Bharat announcements, which is across sectors, so that's for food as well. Second, I think much more than other sectors being considered to be risky and with a lot of demand-side disruption happening. Fortunately, for us in this audience and within this group, food sector is one which has been relatively untouched. So to that extent, I don't see so many disruptions happening in our space, so many difficulties happening in our space compared to many other sectors. God has been kind to us as a sector. So from that standpoint, I think we need not worry so much. So irrespective of course, government is of course doing whatever they are, but I think we are relatively much better off. Of course, we have our own pain, and the financial ecosystem to that extent is going to be much more conducive for us.
Lovely. There is one question from Giridhar Narasimha Murthy with regard to, and Akshay, if I can put to you and anybody else can also step in, with regard to what are the top choices from point of view of import substitution that we may be looking at under Atmanirbhar Bharat, whether it is food products or whether it is food ingredients. What are the top choices with regard to import substitution?
I think the answer to that, depends on the competence of the person and what opportunities. That's what a business. That's what a business is all about. So if somebody wants to get into this space, then he has to find the opportunity, and he'll get the rewards. And I can tell you that there are ample opportunities. It's a huge opportunity. So as the infrastructure is developing, if you keep tab of what is happening, if there's an apple juice plant coming up, then there's going to be waste available for pectin. So people need to be watchful of that, and then they can make projects around it.
Yeah, like with regard to pectin, we are already importing where we can actually be producing it in the country. With regard to orange juice concentrates in frozen form that are coming, because the percentage of juice coming out of local oranges is not as high as compared to that from imported varieties. So we may be looking at alternatives in India also. So many other alternatives and substitutes that may be happening under this as India looks into growing its market.
Last 30 years in country, we were looking at food security. We were not looking at processing. We have a huge ecosystem in our agri universities and a large talent pool that can very quickly be, taken on this path. And it's happening, but they're still not going all out. And I think we need to go all out. So if there is a university dealing in the orange area, they do need to have a target to raise the TSS contents of the fruit around there. So until and unless it's like a mission, it's not going to work. We have to set the agriculture right. Processing will happen. We are growing the wrong varieties. If you are going to grow tomato at 3-degree Brix versus 6-degree Brix, how are you going to make money? Nobody's going to survive. Not the farmer, not the processor. Same thing goes for apple juice, what Anam has said earlier today. It just doesn't work. And my food park is involved on both these sides, and we have hands-on experience of the issues that we are facing. Even with 40% duties, sometimes it becomes difficult to produce. So there's a need for a lot of work to be done very quickly so that we become internationally competitive. Prices need to come down of the producer, and it will only happen if the agriculture gets better.
I totally agree. I think there's a lot of focus right now in India towards tabletop production versus processing. Sugarcane probably is one of the few industries which is dedicated to processing side also. Samana, there is a question for you, Nikita Solanki. Although it is for Nitin, but I think Samana, you may be a better person to answer that. Is with regard to what can you explain what are the core challenges that are being faced today by micro enterprise, and if they have to scale up, what should they be doing in the current situation?
So I think that micro enterprises just face a lot of challenges in general, right? There's lack of capital, which maybe Nitin can help with. There's lack of knowledge sharing, like Akshay was talking about, that we have this huge gamut of agricultural industries and CFTRI and everybody else, but getting knowledge transferred from there to a cottage industry or to a small scale micro unit is difficult. Like we don't have enough handholding as far as that is concerned. And then after that, the marketing is a whole nother challenge, right? To be able to say, yes, we want to do these things, and how do you get the product into the shelf? Even for a company like ours, which is relatively established, for me to introduce a new product onto the shelf is a huge task, right? To take up space, to do all of that. So I think that those are very specific key points that micro enterprises need to be held through. And that was when we didn't have a pandemic on hands. So it's now I think that the challenge is even greater because labor will also be an issue. But with that said, I think that retailers today are a little more keen to keep processed food with them. So they may give that little opportunity to say, yeah, okay, we'll keep you and let's see how you do. But I think that that if I have to divide it, those are the 4 things that I would talk about. And then once you get to a reasonable level, only then can you bring in high scale technology, right? It's a chicken and egg thing with as far as that is concerned. So I would probably put those 4 into what I would say are your biggest challenges.
All right, Nitin, you want to put through your thoughts with regard to food industry in terms of current situation, how they can scale up, and similar questions Samana offer share.
Sure. So I think the one biggest addition which I would like to make, in addition to all the nice things, appropriate things Samana said, is on access to markets. For small enterprises, medium enterprises, micro enterprises, one of the biggest bottlenecks is fair access to markets. And I think on that front, the way the digital technologies are evolving today, the way we are seeing disruptions both on the technology itself and on the way it is being used commercially and socially for a lot of marketing support, I think that's one big area where we've still just scratched the surface. While India prides itself in being the software superpower of the world, I don't think we've done anything to bring the power of that software or bring the power of that technology for the larger benefit of the micro enterprises, small enterprises, and farmers when it comes to market access. We had initiatives of eNAM and a couple of other things more in the B2B space. I think something much bigger, much larger can happen in both in B2B and in the B2C space. while you do have a few aggregators and multinational and Indian e-commerce players as well, but they don't even do 0.1, 0.2% of the overall market opportunity that is there in this space. So to my mind, this services sector, which is on digitally enabling better marketing, better branding, better supply chain, dovetail that with traceability, backend system support, understanding where your product comes from, having a picture of the farmer, having a video of where it has been processed. The possibilities are endless. I was surprised a couple of months back, traveling on Indian Railways. If you look at the IRCTC packet of food, you actually had a QR code. And if you just scan that with your camera, you get the video of the kitchen in which that meal was prepared. So that in case you have any doubt about the veracity of where it's come from, whether it's safe, healthy or not, you can do it. So it's a simple thing. It's a CCTV camera which costs a few thousands of rupees. Broadband is so cheap today. So the sky is the limit for that. So leveraging the power of digital or access to markets, to my mind, is going to be a big disruptor for small, micro, medium enterprises and farmers.
Great. And Anand, one last question, and from our side, we will end it after that, is with regard to skill enhancement. Anything Coke is doing, Coca-Cola is doing from a point of view of skill enhancement policies and encouraging that within the company?
Yes. So if you are talking specifically about the company, I think there are interventions.
Industry, you can go from an industry perspective also.
So two interventions. One is at the farm level. So we all know there's huge ICR infrastructure already in place, but we don't have the luxury of time. So at times we need not, or at times we really need not to reinvent the wheel. So if something is available in US or Europe, European markets, maybe at a royalty or something, some variety is there, why can't we directly adapt it to Indian conditions and bring in? So we are having some interventions there. In terms of oranges, we are bringing Brazilian oranges in Maharashtra, which are drought resistant and high yielding. In apple also, we are doing a same project in Uttarakhand with farmers, this under CSR. So that is for apple, where yields are 5x, working with farmers, and then varieties are from Europe and US. Now coming to retailer side, so who are our partners? So there is a program called Parivartan. So we train them, these all partners, and if you see, we are having around 3 lakh retailers touch points in India. So there's a program where we tell them how to bookkeep, how to inventory manage, how to pick up those skills which are actually more important for them to actually be more competitive and efficient and making better money out of their hard work and effort. So we have that program already there. Similarly, we do have some intervention in the space of food street retailer education program, where we are trying to upgrade their hygiene level and all. So that remains definitely across the system, and it has to be seen as a full circle basically. So we do have some programs around skilling for retailers, for food street vendors, for farmers. So exactly back and forth. Obviously within the system there would be, as any company would have, a lot of skills, and there would be minimum threshold and ongoing trainings and refreshers going on all year round. So that's what a bit of skilling from our side.
Guys, thank you so much. I think the time has flown. We are already 1 hour 35 minutes into our discussion, and would love to talk more, but I think we are out of our time. I sincerely want to thank each one of you for sharing your valuable thoughts with regard to the subject. I'm sure the Government of India will also benefit with these thoughts when we share this recorded version with the Ministry of Food Processing and other government bodies. So thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you again in your future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Thank you.